People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Terms and conditions apply.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Archaeology Show. TAS goes behind the headlines to bring you the real stories about archaeology and the history around us. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeology Show, episode 274.
On today's show, we talk about Plymouth Rock, the Mayflower, and New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Let's dig a little deeper, but not too far, because you'll find out other things aren't real either. Welcome to the Historic Archaeology Podcast.
Yeah, that is sort of our life right now because we're in New England.
Yeah, it's just full of history up here. And
yeah.
I mean, they call it New England, but there's nothing new about it, I feel like.
It was new compared to the other England. So,
I know. It's a joke because I grew up in the West Coast where everything's new over there. And it's just, we watched the closing ceremonies of the Olympics and they transferred over from Paris to Los Angeles where, they're embracing the Hollywood and California lifestyle. It just makes you realize, I mean, sure, I grew up over in that area, not California, but West Coast, and we spent a lot of time in that area. But man, is it different than over here?
It's very different, yeah.
So different.
And I'm like from the OG 13, so...
OG 13?
OG 13.
Yeah.
So, Who
gets that? Nobody. Literally nobody.
Everybody gets that, obviously.
Yeah.
North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
One of the originals.
Uh-huh.
But it is different. You're right. Because there's just... Every city has this like really old part of it that you just don't have in some of the West Coast cities. So, yeah.
I thought you were making a Hunger Games reference.
Oh, for like districts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
kind of
13?
from... Yeah. No, it's District 12, I think.
Oh, it's District 12.
I'm like kind of from there too, right? Wasn't North Carolina
They're definitely
somewhere in that
District
area?
12.
It's definitely south. Anyway. All right. Well,
anyway,
let's get to the point. So we've been seeing a lot of colonial early American history while we've been traveling on the East Coast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the first things we're going to talk about right now is, I think, one of the most iconic things that probably every school child could mention if they said, name something of the first Americans, the first colonial Americans.
White Americans.
The first white Americans.
European Americans.
Yeah, because we all know the first Americans are Native Americans.
Right.
But name something of the first Americans, and they are going to say Plymouth Rock. Yeah. I mean, I swear to God, even if you're not from New England or the East Coast, I knew about Plymouth Rock, right? Yeah. And Plymouth Rock is also one of the biggest pieces of bullshit of American colonial history.
It kind of is.
Of all of it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Which is, kind of a lot of history. I mean, a lot of history is made up by people who want to remember stuff and just say, we really need to put that in the history books, but we don't really know what happened, so let's make it that happened.
Yeah, it's like all about the marketing, right? So like somebody marketed Plymouth Rock like really well, and the Pilgrims, it's the Pilgrims and the Mayflower, so we got Thanksgiving from these people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they were very significant. And before we go into it, the Pilgrims were running from religious oppression, right? So they represent this whole, I don't know, like build a new society where people can be free and do what they want. Right. Ideal, so that's what makes them important. Yeah. So it's important. It's not all bullshit. So
fittingly, Plymouth Rock right now, or what we're calling Plymouth Rock, is sitting inside of a Roman-esque structure.
Like shelter.
Yeah, like a structure,
cover.
but like this column structure. And you could read on the inscription on the on one of the signs there. It was built back in what, the 30s, I think they said.
The structure was, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, because back in the 30s-ish in the United States, these sort of, again, Roman sort of looking structures were thought to be a symbol of strength and, fortitude, and it was just going to last forever. And it probably will, actually. It looks like it's legit made of granite or marble or something.
But it does look like you're walking up to this like really epic thing that you're about to see.
Yeah, it's a rock.
And and like you sort of peer over the edge of this fence thing that is too high to hop over, obviously.
Yeah.
And down in this like mucky pit is a rock.
Yeah.
With the inscription 1620 engraved on it.
I don't know if the tide was out. It's possible that there's actually water in there when the tide is way high.
There might be. It was not, mucky is not a nice word. It was probably sandy more than mucky, right?
It was muddy.
Mucky, sandy.
Yeah. It was definitely wet. So I think water gets in there quite frequently.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's splashing in because it is right up next to the shore, obviously.
Yeah.
But anyway, a little detail about Plymouth Rock here. So it's got 1620 actually engraved on it because, when the boat hit it, it engraved 1620 on it. So no, I'm just kidding. It's supposed to represent the spot that pilgrims literally got off the boat in December of 1620.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is completely wrong.
Which is the BS of it all, right?
Yeah.
Like the pilgrims didn't write of a rock like that. And the first reference to any rock at all in this area on this coastline that was of any significance is not until 1715, almost 100 years later. And it's just called a Great Rock.
Yeah.
But not like the Disembarkation Rock or anything like that.
Right. But if you've ever seen the New England coast in movies or you've been there, it's a lot of great rocks.
Well, it is. But this particular area is a little beachier, maybe. So, like, the rock, it's a little bit unusual to have a rock of that giant size.
I don't know. There's a lot of rocks there.
Yeah. I don't know.
If you're coming ashore, you're not doing it in the Mayflower.
No.
You're doing it in a small boat, a dinghy, right? And you're going to, that dinghy is going to beat up against something. Somebody's going to jump out in the water or jump out onto a rock or something like that. If a handy
rock happens to be there, maybe. Yeah.
You're going to jump on top of it. I mean, if it really was December, then the water's going to be stupid cold. I mean, it's August and the water's not crazy warm right now, right? So December, the water's like really cold. There's likely lots of snow on the ground. Yeah. And it's going to be cold, right? And it's not like you're just going to warm right up. So there's a lot more to this story too, but we'll get there.
It seems like this idea, the story that you just painted, which is a possibility, right? It kind of seems like it was a fiction that sort of was materialized in the head of a descendant of one of the people that landed, right? So in 1741, a 94-year-old Thomas Fonts claimed that it was the landing place. And he is the child who was born in New England of a couple of the people that were on the ship. So he wasn't even there. He's like speaking from, memory of something his parents told him.
He's born like 30 years later.
Yeah, exactly. So, or maybe even grandparents. It might have been his grandparents. I'm not even sure. But yeah. So, I mean, it turned it into a symbol of this founding of the nation. But, it seems like it was created in the mind of this like super old man.
Which is fine. I mean, they did land somewhere. So does it really matter in the end? But anyway, the thing is, it is a boulder. One of the things I thought was kind of neat is you can actually see that the boulder was cut in half. Yeah. And it says in an inscription there, again, not on the rock, obviously, but in a board, I guess, that at some point they did cut it in half and they took half the boulder up to like a city hall type of place.
One of the official buildings.
And then at some point they took it back. Yeah. And it looks like they actually seamed it back together. You can kind of see these like staple looking things. Yeah. Like metal, but they stitched it back together basically. And now it's got this big thing over it. So yeah.
And that inscription that says 1620, when do you think it was added, that inscription?
1621.
No, 1880. Yeah. It's always about marketing and creating a story, right? So that's fine. It's fine. I'm not even mad about it. Not really.
Here's the biggest BS of it all. The Mayflower didn't even land there. I know. Right? The Mayflower...
Not first. It wasn't first. Yeah.
No, the Mayflower first landed in Provincetown, which we did go to. Yeah. Provincetown, if you look at Cape Cod is this big C-shaped cape if you will. And
like backwards sea,
the land,
kinda.
it's like a backwards sea in Massachusetts there. And if you're going to drive out there, plan for like 3 hours of traffic.
Yes.
We went all the way out to Provincetown, which is the town at the very, very end.
Yes.
And
cool little town,
right.
Little seaside town for sure.
And it makes sense that that's where they first landed, because that's like, as you're coming in, that's the first little spit of land that you're actually going to contact before you get into the bay.
Around the top of that sea, it's like probably the first protected spot that you could
probably
land comfortably, right?
On one side, if you look at the Sharktivity app, it is all sharks and violent water. On the other side, it's like all nice and calm
bay water
and no sharks.
Yeah,
right. So
exactly.
And that's where we hung out on the beach for a little while.
We did.
Yeah,
it was so
really
nice.
Yeah. So anyway, they hung out there for like a month while they just kind of like explored the area, found a good spot, and said that rock over there looks super cool. Let's found a town there.
Yeah.
And they founded Plymouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it wasn't even the first place that they stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, there's a lot of politics around it, because I think I read too that the whole reason that Mr. Fonts came out and was like, oh, the rock, and is because they were building some kind of like marina in that area. And it was like potentially just like a protest against like messing up the shoreline, essentially.
Wait,
so like
a 94-year-old person was protesting progress?
Yeah, right.
That sounds odd. Yeah.
And guess what?
Right.
It is a marina in that area right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Well, let's take a break. And on the other side, we'll talk about how we toured the Mayflower, which is right next to the rock.
Yeah, totally.
Well, the Mayflower too. All right. Back in a minute.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Back-to-school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop the latest school styles with an extra 25% off during Tanger Style, our biggest sale of the season, now through August 25th. Plan your trip at tanger.com.
People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to episode 274 of the Archaeology Show, and let's talk about the Mayflower. So Mayflower was, of course, the ship that the Pilgrims came over on. And, of course, the Mayflower no longer exists, or at least I don't think it does.
I doubt it. I mean, it's a 400-year-old boat.
Yeah, that'll be a long time ago. Now, the Mayflower 2 is a recreation. So, and it's a very faithful recreation. I mean, this boat actually works. Apparently, it costs thousands of dollars a day to just operate because it takes so many people, and all those people want to be paid. So, I overheard one of the people when we actually went on board the Mayflower 2, which is just a few hundred steps away from Plymouth Rock, and I heard them talking about it, and they said that it's been several years since it's actually been out of port. Yeah. So
expensive.
Yeah, but it was so cool getting on that ship. I mean, it's really a legit tall ship.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You do feel like you're stepping back into like the environment that you are, because it is a pretty faithful reproduction. And so you walk on a gangway, I guess that's probably what it's called, right? The gangway up onto it, and then you come out and you're sort of in the captain's area where and this I thought was so cool, is they wouldn't have had the big wheel for steering the ships like you see. They didn't have that back then. They just had this like back and forth like lever thing. I don't know
for
what
the
you call
rudder.
that. For the rudder.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
I don't know stuff about ships, but I didn't know that the wheel hadn't been invented yet for steering the ship. So it was a lever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a rudder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that seems crazy that's how you would steer this giant ship.
I know.
I mean, I'm blown away by that.
Yeah.
You're not. I don't know why.
I don't know. Because for thousands of years, that's how they steered ships.
Well, sure, but I don't know. That was crazy to me.
Well, it was really cool. What I liked about it was it was a lot shorter than I expected it to be.
Yeah,
but a lot deeper than I expected it to be.
Yeah, there's like 3 levels, right?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Maybe
actually,
even 4
if
with
you
some of
count
the stuff going up the sides. Yeah.
And you could see the captain's quarters weren't as
elaborate,
big as I thought they would be. Yeah, they weren't as like fancy.
Wasn't Captain Hook's ship, that's for sure.
It definitely was
That's
not.
my like touchstone, right? That's what I know an old ship to look like.
Right. Well, and the crazy thing is too, I mean, this wasn't obviously like a slave ship or anything like that, but it sure as probably hell felt like it to some people because when they were coming over, there weren't like sleeping quarters or beds or anything like that. People basically were told, get in the hold. That's where you're going to be for a couple of months on this voyage. And some people built beds and like walls and things for their loved ones to sleep in for a little bit of privacy, and other people just slept on the floor for months while they were making this Atlantic crossing.
It's absolutely crazy that was it. They didn't even try to like create personal space at all. It was just not really, like they kind of did, like you said, but not. It was very, very much out in the open. I liked the crane basically with the block and tackle system for cargo. I thought that was really cool. I mean, they really created everything in a very faithful to a early 1600s ship of that nature. Right. And I'm just looking at some stats about it, and it says that it carried approximately 135 people to Plymouth. I don't think I knew that there was that many people on the Mayflower. You think of it as being smaller, right? But 135 people, that's a lot to be crammed into that small space.
Keep in mind, too, this wasn't like a voyage of exploration or anything like that. This was just people who paid for passage. Right? There was a lot of crew members. So a lot of people that just went back. I remember the people who were on this ship, they were seeking religious freedoms, and they had actually left England and I think went to Denmark and some of those areas up there, but they were not very happy up there either.
Not Denmark, the Netherlands.
That's right. Anyway, up there somewhere. But they weren't happy up there either. And then they heard about the New World and they were like, let's go there instead. They still had to seek, I thought this was interesting too, they still had to seek like a charter from the King of England for the land. And the land that they had a charter for to basically establish a colony was off the Hudson. And because the weather was starting to get bad, and they basically pulled into the Provincetown area and that Cape up there because the weather was starting to get bad. And the captain was like, you know what, we're not going any farther because it's December and you're done. And he said, you've got 2 choices. He said, basically, you could either just recommission for a charter, and it's going to take probably a year going back and forth with mail and stuff like that to England to try to get the king to give you your charter and to give you land up here, or you can hike down to the Hudson. And they're like, I'm not going to do that. And so that's where the Mayflower Compact came from, is they basically said, you know what, we're just going to defy the King of England, and we're just going to establish a town here whether they like it or not. And I don't know, we didn't do any really research into that because we were talking about the Mayflower itself, but it all worked out eventually in the end. But they basically said, we're just going to do this anyway. So,
and they did it. I mean, it was very rebellious for like a Puritan society. They just wanted to be left alone to do their own thing. So,
and I guess it was probably far enough away from basically everything at the time that England was probably like, okay, we'll just deal with it. We'll deal with it later. We just can't
like manage all this, so like whatever, just it's fine. Pay us the taxes, we'll be fine.
We'll deal with you guys in a bit.
That will come back to haunt them later, but
exactly.
But for the first 100 years or so, I guess it was fine.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Well, I think that's all we have to say probably about the Mayflower. It was a worthy tour. It was super cool. And I'll just put in a little like genealogy plug here. Because the thing that happens to me when I research stories like this is I start seeing these names of people and I'm like, I wonder if I'm related to any of these people, because I do have some of my family lines are much older than some of the others. So, and
it's really easy to search this stuff. In fact, I'll put the link in the show notes. But you can actually go to this website, take a family name of an ancestor of yours, and type their name in, and it'll tell you if that name has ancestry to somebody who was on the Mayflower. Oh. And you'll have to piece through a list and see like, oh, well, this Elizabeth Smith was born in this place and it's not the right Elizabeth Smith to be my Elizabeth Smith. But, you know, like you have to like pick through it a little bit. But it was really cool. And I didn't find any connection to any Mayflower ancestors with any of my family's names. But it was really cool to like find that connection. It's like a personal connection with history that makes it so much more interesting to me than just reading the words, you know? Yeah. And I didn't find that connection this time, but that's okay. It was still really fun searching for it. I looked for your family too. I also did not find any connection for you. Not any Websters at all. I thought Webster being like, you know, kind of an old name, but... Well,
the research that my brother did found that the Websters were actually from a town I can't remember the name of in England, and it was about the early 1600s.
Yeah.
But came over, and one of the Websters that I'm related to was one of the first governors before there were governors of Connecticut.
Yeah.
It wasn't I don't think he was called a governor. It was something before Connecticut was actually a state.
Yeah,
I
something
think.
with the colony, probably.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's really cool. And probably they just came over in a different boat system rather than through the Mayflower funnel
And funny thing is, when we were in New York up at Niagara Falls, we went out to eat somewhere, and I was paying for our food, and the kid who was like in his 20s.
Yeah.
He saw my card and he's like, Webster. He's like, my last name is Webster. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I'm from up around here. He's like, oh, I'm not. And we just started talking. And, you know, the guy who came over, he came over with like 9 kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm willing to bet every Webster up in this area is probably related to that guy.
Yeah. Most of the Websters in this country probably are.
Probably.
If you just spread out across the country.
He's the Genghis Khan of the United States.
Right.
So.
Totally.
Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about New Bedford.
Yeah.
Massachusetts, and then we'll finish up this discussion in segment 3.
Yeah.
But this is one of the other places we went, and it's down south, actually quite next to Rhode Island.
Yeah, the park we were in was in this really great location where we could get all the way out to the tip of Cape Cod. We could get over to Plymouth, up to Boston, which is why we talked about all the stuff we talked about in the last episode. And now we were able to go more to the west to New Bedford or
south.
West and south, yeah.
New Bedford and Plymouth were about the same distance.
Yeah, they were. It was crazy. It was they called it the gateway to Cape Cod Park, but it was like the gateway to all of that.
Yeah, gateway to everything.
Yeah, gateway to everything.
Yeah.
It was a cool place.
So, New Bedford National Historic Park was kind of like right in the middle of New Bedford.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like a collection of buildings in that downtown area that were part of basically the whaling industry in New Bedford 100 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, if you've ever heard of like 19th century whaling, 1800s whaling, and
Moby Dick.
even earlier than that, Moby Dick.
Yeah.
Just your iconic picture of these whaling ships and these people and all that stuff.
Yeah.
New Bedford is where all that happened.
All of it.
All of it.
All of it. Worldwide, all of it.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me. Because you think of whaling as, there was other places that were doing whaling, indigenous populations doing whaling on a different level with different materials and everything. But this like worldwide, like hunt anywhere for a whale thing was basically based out of New Bedford. So crazy.
Yeah. So crazy.
Yeah. A couple of the buildings that they have left are standing that you can do tours of, although we didn't because again things were closed, but that's fine. Was the Seamen's Bethel, which was created by the New Bedford Port Society for the Moral Improvement of Seamen. They built it as a church for whalemen, basically to keep them from gambling, drinking, and whoring when they came into port.
I don't know how they kept them from gambling, drinking, and whoring while they were out whaling for 3-4 years.
Well, like they gave them a church. They gave them a place to worship, basically, so they could, do that instead of the bad things. But,
let's see how that worked out for them.
Yeah. Also still present is the U.S. Custom House, and I thought this was cool because it was completed in 1836, and it's still in operation today, and it's the oldest continuously operating custom house in the nation. So that's cool.
Yeah, crazy thing. New Bedford was known as the city that lit the world.
Yeah.
So we watched this Really cool video. Now, anybody that's been to a national park knows that there's always some little video that you can see somewhere in the visitor center. Bad. Yeah, some of them are really bad. Yeah. Some of them are 40 years old.
Yeah.
This one, I thought, like, I could have sat there. I could have grabbed some popcorn and probably sat there for another hour and just continued watching.
The thing it did is it made me feel like I didn't need to do anything else. Like I didn't need to read every sign. I didn't need to look at every picture because it was such a comprehensive overview of the whaling industry in this area. So, I mean, I like a nice, well-packaged bit of information, and that's definitely what we got in this like 20-minute video.
I know. It was really cool.
Yeah.
One of the things that we learned there was that New Bedford was the center of the whaling industry in New England in the 19th and 20th century. Mm-hmm. Right? So the land New Bedford was on was purchased, I'd like to see that receipt, from the Wampanoag people in 1652. I wonder what they got for it.
Yeah.
A couple of blankets,
probably. There wasn't more information on that, but I don't know. I'm guessing it wasn't a fair trade, but, you know, that was colonialist in the 1600s. So, yeah. In the mid-1700s, it was developed as a whaling port because whales were consistently caught in nearby waters that were on their migratory paths. So it was just kind of a logical place to pop out, grab some whales, bring them back in for processing, that kind of thing.
All right. With that, let's go ahead and take a short break. We'll talk about another little island you probably heard of that was part of this little story on the other side. And we'll finish our little whale tale.
A whale of a tail?
It's not a whale of a tail. It is a whale tail, though.
Okay.
Yes. We'll do that on the other side. Back in a minute.
Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Terms and conditions apply.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Welcome back to the Archaeology Show, episode 274. Talking about whaling in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and the island I mentioned that you might have heard of if you were a fan of the TV show Wings.
Oh, jeez. Why is that your only reference point for this island?
Because I grew up on the West Coast and I didn't even know about it until that show came out.
Talking about Nantucket.
Nantucket.
Which is like the rich person's vacation island. Well, in addition to Martha's Vineyard, which is right next to it. But
when we looked at coming out here, I was thinking about taking a little plane ride out to Nantucket.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to take one of the little twin engine planes like they did in the show Wings back in like the 90s.
Right.
First off, those little twin engine planes, they're basically American Airlines now. I mean, you could take little corporate jets out there too. It's like $400 or $500 for 2 people to take a day trip out there.
That's so stupid.
Which is dumb. Yeah. And then it's full of people because it's the middle of the summer.
It's very crowded.
So you're not going to do anything. If you want to spend the night, you're going to spend $1,000 a night.
Which is insane.
Yeah. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
anyway. we didn't go. We did not get to go to Nantucket, but we did get to learn about it a little bit.
Yes. You know who did go to Nantucket? Whales. So.
Well, not when they were alive, but yeah.
Yeah. Well.
So New Bedford was beginning to establish itself as a whaling port, but also at the same time, the island / town of Nantucket, because I think the main town is also called Nantucket.
It's all one and the same.
Yeah. They were also a whaling town, and they had an advantage because being an island, they were closer to the migratory routes that whales were taking, and it was just easier to get to that whaling activity from Nantucket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by the 19th century, the shallow harbor, sandbars, and dangerous shoals caused Nantucket to fall out of favor.
Yeah.
Boats were like, this is too dangerous.
Yeah, so that's when New Bedford really came in hot.
Yeah. Plus, the whaling voyages started moving further and further offshore because they were, killing all the whales.
Yeah.
So they had to go elsewhere. They started going around Cape Horn, which is down the bottom end of South America, Chile, and Cape of Good Hope, South Africa.
Yep.
And for comparison, in 1815, 50 whaling ships left Nantucket and 10 left New Bedford.
Yeah. So it's still very heavily Nantucket at that point.
In 1815.
Yeah.
Yeah. But by 1820, you had 45 ships leaving Nantucket and 36 ships leaving New Bedford.
Yep.
Yeah.
In 5 years, it practically caught up. And then in 1823, just another 3 years later, New Bedford surpassed Nantucket. And really, that's where the scales tipped. And New Bedford really became the center of the whaling industry at that point. Also, it helped that in 1840, the railroad arrived to New Bedford, and that gave the merchants who were selling the things made out of whaling products, gave them easier access to Boston, New York, and basically the entire Northeast, probably even beyond that too. I bet they could get to Chicago fairly easily once the railroad got there. So that's just... It made New Bedford one of the wealthiest cities in the world because of all of the whaling products that they were selling. Yeah,
the whales they were taking began with basically 4 primary species. There were right whales and sperm whales, which could be basically found everywhere. Gray whales, which were found on the west coast of America, and bowheads, which were in the Arctic.
Yeah.
By the 1800s, in the North Atlantic, sperm and right whale populations were basically gone.
Yeah.
They were nearly decimated completely.
How did they not see the decimation of whale populations coming? These guys would head out on these voyages to kill as many whales as possible, and then all of a sudden the whales were gone. What did they expect? And I read too that sometimes they would take there would be a mother and a baby, and they'd want the mother obviously because she's bigger, but they'd end up killing the baby too because why not? Baby's there. And so
I think this short-sighted money grab.
Yeah, where's the logic? If that baby doesn't grow up, then there's no big whale in 2 years or 10 years, and there's no... Anyway, the short-sightedness of it is crazy.
It's selfishness.
Yeah.
You've got the whaling captains.
Want to be rich.
Yeah, they probably didn't even own their boats. The boats had owners.
Yeah, the boats had owners.
And they had to bring home a certain amount of oil and products, and it was just... If they didn't, everybody was looking out for themselves. Yeah. And that's where that went, unless you got federal programs that are doing something else.
Well, which didn't even happen until the 1970s from what I was reading. So, but this is still the mid 1800s, and oil made from whale blubber is the craved item that is basically lighting the world at this time. So whale hunting is not going to stop anytime soon. And these big ships out of New Bedford were able to go further and further away. Like in 1846, the gray whale breeding grounds in the Baja California area were discovered. And those populations were decimated in just a few decades. Yeah. That's where I think they were really taking mothers and babies because they were breeding grounds and just killed the entire population.
What I don't get is that, it said a few decades, right? 1846 they were discovered, which means that's going up into the 1850s, 1860s. Mm-hmm. You've got a number of major cities growing on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. I still don't understand.
What? Yeah.
Yeah. Why are they going all the way around South America?
I do not understand that either.
Why wasn't there a whaling center set up on the West Coast?
It
for
makes
processing.
No sense to me.
Yeah.
Even these super rich guys in New Bedford could have just established a satellite office in San Francisco or something, right? Why didn't they do that? But, the gold rush hadn't happened yet. So San Francisco was still just a
1849
pile of sticks. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's crazy, but it might have been the processing, right? Because they could kill the whale, but they had to then process it. So maybe it was just more efficient to bring it back to New Bedford I
don't know. They processed and barreled and put everything together on the boats.
Yeah, I think the first steps they did, right? Yeah. But then it had
was
to
just shipping after that.
Well, there was candle making. So what they were doing.
But they were making candles on the West Coast. They didn't have electricity.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just saying... The people in New Bedford, they died because they couldn't adapt, and they couldn't. Their lack of adaptation, A, not being able to put centers up on the West Coast, and B, not being able to figure out what to do when they had no more whales, caused basically their decline.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what they did, right? Like they were just taking out population after population. The bowheads in the Arctic were almost extinct by 1900, and this is where it's sort of the downfall began, because in the early 1900s, technology was improving, as everything kind of did in that time period, and the Norwegians actually pioneered steam-powered boats with harpoon cannons that allowed them to catch the faster, bigger species that were too dangerous for the older technologies to go after. And because they could get these bigger, faster species, it almost like the industry kind of shifted to these Norwegian boats, and New Bedford began to decline, and it just like never really caught up.
Yeah.
The whole city just sort of, whaling just kind of left the city at that point.
So aside from whale oil and spermaceti, well, spermaceti is the highest quality oil.
High quality one. Yeah.
That made the best candle wax.
Yeah.
Lighting up homes and things like that.
Yeah.
It just was a pure illumination, apparently.
Yeah.
Just like amazing.
It was the best. It was probably the most expensive too, don't you think?
Yeah. But something I never really realized until we watched that video, or at least forgot, I guess I probably knew this at some point in my life, but baleen, which is like the strainer on the mouth of a whale that they would suck in all this krill and stuff like that, and that
Plankton
would
and stuff, right?
Things like that. But the baleen's basically bone.
Yeah.
And that would be,
it's like a cartilage. It's almost like a flexible, like firm, but like with some flexibility to it. So you could bend it, right?
Yeah, it'd be used for corsets, collars, hooped frames for a skirt. But the fashion industry just like jumped on it, and they were using it all over the place.
Yeah. What's so funny about that is because I have done some sewing in my day.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, a little bit. And the fashion industry called baleen whalebone, even though it's technically not officially bone. It's like more this like cartilage substance, which maybe not even cartilage technically. I'm not sure what scientifically it is, but it's still, it's not made of whalebone anymore, obviously, but you still like here, of course, it's made out of whalebone. And it's just like a plastic substitute these days, but the word is still in use to describe the hard bits that are inside of corsets, which is crazy.
Yeah, another thing they got out of the whales, because they used, most of the whale.
Yeah, they tried to anyway.
Ambergris was produced from the whale intestines.
Yeah, gross.
And apparently it was used in fine perfumes, and it would keep the scent from changing.
Yeah.
It was also occasionally added to wine as an aphrodisiac.
So is it the first preservative?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And like, how is it an aphrodisiac, and what would it make wine taste like? I just don't know about any of that.
I don't know.
I'm very uncomfortable with that.
You're just happy to see me.
Like, what? Yeah. I'm so uncomfortable with all that. No, thank you. That's just super weird.
All right. So to wrap up this segment here in this podcast, let's talk about some of the people who were on the ships.
Yes.
Yeah. So they had any number of different types of men only typically, who were on these boats.
Yeah.
You had your people who were married, but these ships' voyages were typically 3 to 4 years long.
Yeah.
They were out for a long time, and then they came back and they were home for, a year, 6 months, whatever, and then they were off on another journey. Yeah.
Like they made a lot of money on these voyages. Well, ish.
Some of them weren't paid, they said.
Well, okay, so there was different types of people on these voyages.
Yes.
And one of the types, and I really liked that the National Historical Park kind of highlighted this, but there were escaped slaves.
Yeah.
And they were getting on these ships, these whaling ships, and leaving for years, and hopefully would be gone before, by the time the dust settled on whoever was looking for them, whatever slaver was looking for them.
Yeah. But there was, people who were just liked the sea, people who were trying to escape, people who wanted to be gone, people who wanted to see the world.
And people who wanted to make money.
People who wanted to make money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the town itself was a big mishmash mix of cultures, including the African Americans and the natives, but there was Cape Verdeans, Pacific Islanders, and, also various different Europeans.
Right.
So,
that was the other cool thing too, is not only was there a lot of different people from New England, the Native Americans and the, African Americans and escaped slaves, But they would, pick up and recruit people from other areas and bring them onto the ships. And then they would end up just settling in New Bedford. Yeah. So there's like in New Bedford currently, you can find restaurants and things like that for like Cape Verdean cuisine and, Pacific Islanders cuisine and stuff like that. And really people who just heritage. Yeah. Because that was only like, 150 years ago.
Yeah, totally. One of the best breakfast spots in town that we didn't get to try was a Portuguese place.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
It's such a weird mix of cultures up there. Yeah. That you wouldn't expect in New England.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And they had a much more relaxed view of what these sort of immigrants could do, including black people and black men, not the ladies, not yet. We weren't there yet for the ladies, but black men could own property, pay taxes, vote, and basically be participating members of society. What? So I know. So it was a very inclusive community by lots of the people there. Not everybody, of course, but
by those standards in the 1800s.
Exactly. And so it was a place where escaped slaves and even free black people too were just moving to because it was a nice place to be for them. So by 1837, the population of New Bedford had grown to 16,000, and that included 1,047 African Americans. Of those, 400 of them were fugitive slaves. Yeah. So that was the breakdown of that population there.
Yep. The entire community, black and white, protected the fugitive slaves, and they created the New Bedford Anti-Slavery Society. Yeah. So big abolitionist movement up there.
Yeah. And this is where the National Historical Park comes in, because there was a couple, Nathan and Mary J., who went by Polly Johnson. And they were a free black couple living in New Bedford, and their house is still there, which is another structure we didn't get to see because it wasn't open the day that we were there. We were going to go get a tour, but it wasn't open, so it didn't happen. But they were basically a stop on the Underground Railroad, kind of like the final stop on the Underground Railroad, because this was a place where escaped slaves wanted to set up camp, or like you were saying, hop a ship and get out of town until things weren't so hot anymore, you know? And Nathan and Polly were a very interesting couple. Polly in particular was the one who devoted herself to assisting these escaped slaves, and she was instrumental in helping to house Frederick Douglass and his wife when they ended up in New Bedford for a little while before they settled elsewhere in New England. I can't remember where, but they were in New Bedford in her house for a while. So
old Fred Douglass.
Yeah. And what she did partly as a cover is she established a confectionery business. Not even a cover. It was just a successful confectionery business. And she was able to use the money that she made off of that business to support her family and also all of these Underground Railroad efforts that she was involved in. Yeah. So
she was a candy lady.
She was a candy lady.
Yeah. Nathan, on the other hand, wasn't so good at business.
Yeah. I mean, they were still married, but
he left her in 1849 after several failed business attempts to seek his fortune in the California gold rush. Yeah. Should have brought knowledge of the whaling industry with him.
I know, right?
Would have made a fortune. Yeah. Polly continued selling candy and baked goods and helped escaped slaves until she died in 1871.
Yeah. And by all accounts, Nathan never returned to New Bedford from California. I guess he liked his West Coast. West is best, right? Yep. He never returned until after she died, because he had to return in order to claim the house, I guess. And then the house went to their children for a little while, and then it ended up becoming part of this National Historical Park. So you can go see this really, really important stop on the Underground Railroad if you head into that town. And if you also check the hours before you go, and to make sure that is actually open.
Yes.
Which is just the one thing that we can say about every place we've been to this summer is check the hours before you go. Don't you think?
I think so. And if you're interested, we didn't go to this either because half of us just aren't interested in these things, but there was a museum not associated with the National Historic Park about whaling and just basically ships and things like that, the whaling ships. Apparently there's a big whale skeleton that I didn't get to see, and a huge ship
you
I didn't
saw
get
it
to
when
see.
We walked in the door.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, look. We had big plans for that day. We had a lot of places to go, and we didn't have time to meander through an entire giant building dedicated just to catching whales. We just didn't have time. And it was more expensive than we wanted to pay for what was going to be a blitz excursion to run through that museum.
Okay, whatever.
I learned my lesson. Don't ever say no to something shipping related with this man. Good Lord.
All right. Whatever.
But yeah, if you have a whole day to because we were off to another place after that. If you have the whole day, though, I think it would certainly have been worth it. It looked like a really cool museum. And the whole town, you're walking along cobblestone streets. The buildings are all so old. And because they were built by, these rich whaling people back in the 1800s and 1900s, they were all quality buildings, too. And they just have stood the test of time. They're like just really neat old structures. So the whole town vibe was really cool.
All right. Well, there weren't a lot of pictures to take in New Bedford, to be honest with you. It was a video and some other stuff. But I did take pictures of the Mayflower too and Plymouth Rock. So if you want to see those, you can check our Roadster Adventures Instagram account if you want to join the many, many hundreds of other, many, many, many dozens of other people there. And
the not even 1,000.
the many tens of people there. and join the masses. RODSTER Adventures. Maybe that's why people can find us. They think it's ROAD.
Maybe.
RODSTER. It's a mixture of Rachel's last name and my last name. Roadster Adventures.
Yep.
So, because there's a little line over the O. We made it complicated and grammatical.
Yeah. I just like my last name is Roden. I know it's not spelled like road, but it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So
yeah. It's crazy.
World.
Change your last name.
No.
It could just be Webster Adventures.
Ugh, that's so boring. Like the dictionary's adventures, blah, blah, blah.
Adventures of the dictionary.
Actually, that would be kind of funny.
Dick's Adventures.
Adventures of the Dicks.
Wow. That escalated quickly.
Yeah,
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Archaeology Show. Feel free to comment and view the show notes on the website at www.archpodnet.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ArchPodNet. Music for this show is called I Wish You Would Look from the band Sea Hero. Again, thanks for listening and have an awesome day. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Rachel Roden.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.